The cemetery was quiet at first, white tents flap in the wind. Mourners in black capes and black attire filled the tent. A golden casket rests above a dark open grave lined with fresh cement. On the casket lies Margaret Thompson, billionaire CEO, queen of 3 towers on Manhattan Island. Her eyes closed, cotton wool tucked in her nostrils and her skin pale. Her husband Robert stands beside the casket with a folded handkerchief. Tears shine in his eyes. A pastor clears his throat. 2 grave workers step forward to lower the casket. Then a voice tears the air like thunder. "Stop! Don't bury her." Everyone turned in shock at the statement. Some of the mourners lifted their phones to record the unfolding drama. At the back, a man in a tattered brown coat pushes through the crowd. His beard is overgrown and tangled. His hair is wild. A dirty old bag hangs on his shoulder, heavy with the life he still carries. People pull away from him as if he is a storm. The man points straight at Margaret. His hand shakes, but his voice does not. "She's not dead," I said. "Don't bury her." "Who is this?" Someone whispers. "Poor man." Another mutters. "Security." 2 guards move to block him, but he steps sideways and keeps coming. The wind lifts his coat like wings. He stops at the edge of the mat where the casket rests and faces the crowd. "My name is Thomas," he says, breathless. "Listen to me. This woman is alive." Robert stiffens. His mouth hardens. "Get this mad man out." He snaps. "Sir, you will respect the dead. Margaret is my wife. She is gone. We will bury her in peace." The mourners murmured. The pastor lowers his Bible. The grave workers pause. Thomas points again. Firm, steady. "She is not gone," he says. "She was given a substance. It slows the breathing. It makes the body cold. It fools the eye. She looks dead, but she is not. Give her the neutralizer." Now, a wave of shock washes over the mourners. Someone whispers, "Neutralizer." Another says, "What is he talking about?" Cameras tilt closer. A reporter leans in. Robert's face tightens with anger. "Enough," he says, turning to the guards. "Remove him." But Thomas does not move. He lifts his chin. "Robert," he says softly, like he knows him. "You know what you did. And Dr. Samuel knows too." The name drops like a stone in water. Eyes flick to the left. The family doctor Samuel stands with his stethoscope tucked in his pocket, his lips pressed in. He looks at Thomas the way a person looks at a locked door. "Pastor," Robert says, voice sharp, "continue the service." The pastor hesitates. His fingers tremble on the page. Thomas takes one slow step closer to the casket. His eyes soften when he looks at Margaret. "Madam," he whispers almost to himself. "Hold on." Then he raises his voice. "Check her mouth. Touch her wrist. Warm her chest. She is there. I heard the plan with my own ears." Robert spoke of quick burial. Dr. Samuel signed the paper. "Please give her the neutralizer." The hush deepens. Even the tent stopped flapping as if listening. A woman in purple lace steps out from the first row. Her hands shake. "If there is a chance," she says, "we should check." "That is not necessary." Robert snaps. Sweat shines on his forehead. "We did everything." The doctor confirmed. "Let them check." Someone says from the crowd, "What will it cost?" Another voice joins. "Just check." Now the murmur grows into a wave. Heads nod. Eyes narrow at Robert. The guards look unsure. Dr. Samuel clears his throat. "This is ridiculous," he says, forcing a smile. "Grief is making strangers speak nonsense." I examined her thoroughly. Thomas turns to him, gentle but firm. "Doctor, she gave you a hospital. She bought you a car. She trusted you." Something flickers in Dr. Samuel's eyes. He looks at Robert. Robert gives the smallest shake of his head. And that is when Thomas drops his bag on the grass, kneels by the casket, and does a simple thing. He takes off his coat and folds it into a pillow. "Please," he says to the pastor, to anyone brave enough, "help me sit her up a little. Just a little. She needs air." Then open her mouth only a drop. Silence. The kind of silence that hurts. An older woman steps forward. Her veil is tight and neat. Her eyes are wet. "I am her aunt," she says. "If there is one small thing we can do, we will do it." The spell breaks. 2 women move. A young man in a black suit places his hand under Margaret's shoulders. The grave workers step back to give space. Together, carefully, they lift Margaret just enough for Thomas to slide the folded coat beneath her neck. Up close, Margaret's face looks like sleep. Her lashes are long shadows. The cotton wool in her nostrils is white against her skin. "Please remove the wool," Thomas says softly. Slowly, the aunt nods and with gentle fingers pulls the cotton free. The air seems to move again. Thomas takes a small brown vial from his bag. It looks old, like it has seen many roads. He holds it up for everyone to see. "Neutralizer," he says. "Her body was slowed by something bitter. This will walk her back." Robert lunges, but two mourners step between him and Thomas. "Let him try," one says. "If it fails, we bury. If it works, then what?" Robert spits. "Then what?" "Then we thank God," the aunt says, eyes sharp as a blade. Dr. Samuel's jaw clenches. "Do not put strange liquid in her mouth." The doctor protests weakly. The aunt says firmly, "If you are sure she is gone, this will do nothing. Let him try." All eyes settle on the vial. The sun slips out from behind a cloud and rests like a hand on the scene, on the casket, on the open grave, on the man in the tattered coat, who looks like hope. Thomas kneels. His hands are steady now, made strong by purpose. He twists the cap and dips the glass dropper into the vial. He turns to the aunt. "Please help me open her mouth." The aunt slides a finger gently at the corner of Margaret's lips. The young man in black lifts Margaret a little more. Thomas leans close. The crowd leans with him. Robert trembles. "If you do this," he begins, but his voice cracks. Thomas holds a dropper above Margaret's mouth. "One drop," he whispers. "Come back, madam." He squeezes. A single clear drop falls. It lands on Margaret's tongue. Everywhere was quiet, waiting for what happens next. Thomas counts under his breath. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. 4, 5. A wind shivers through the tents. 6. Thomas's hand shakes. He raises the dropper for one more drop. "Don't you dare," Robert shouts, stepping forward. The aunt lifts a palm. "Stay back." Thomas squeezes. The second drop falls, and in that tiny space between drop and tongue, before it touches, a sound crawls up from Margaret's chest, so faint it could be wind or memory. Was that a cough? The drop touches. Margaret's throat moves. Her lips part. And then the air around the cemetery broke into chaos. Screams, shouts, prayers, and gasps filled the place all at once. Phones tilted wildly, recording what no one could believe. Margaret's hand had twitched, and now her lips parted with a faint cough. The sound was so soft, yet it cut through the noise like lightning. Thomas's eyes burned with hope. He leaned closer. "She's coming back," he said, voice trembling, but sure. "I told you she's alive." The aunt clutched Margaret's wrist, and her face lit up. "She's warm. Lord have mercy. She's warm," she cried. Another woman screamed and fell to her knees in prayer, chanting, "God is great. God is great." But Robert was not moved. His face twisted into fury. As Margaret's body stowed, his hand darted inside his jacket pocket. He pulled out something small, metallic. Its glint caught in the sunlight. Thomas froze. Was it a knife, a syringe, or worse? "Stay back!" Robert roared, his eyes wild, spittle on his lips. "She belongs in the ground. Do you hear me? In the ground." Two men in black suits lunged toward him, but he shoved them away with desperate strength. The crowd surged backward, panicked. Mothers pulled children close. The pastor dropped his Bible, his voice cracking in fear. Thomas did not move. He stood his ground, his ragged coat brushing the grass, his beard shaking with the wind. His voice thundered again, stronger than before. "Look at her, Robert. Look at your wife. She breathes." Everyone turned, and there it was, Margaret's chest, rising and falling, weak but undeniable. Another cough burst from her throat, louder this time. Her eyes fluttered like heavy doors trying to open. The crowd gasped as one. The aunt shouted, "She's alive! She's alive!" Margaret's lips trembled, and a hoarse whisper escaped. "Why?" Her eyes half opened, glassy and confused. She stared at the man looming over her. Her voice grew louder, filled with pain. "Robert, why?" The scene shifted in an instant. The strength drained from Robert's body. His hand dropped, the metallic object slipping from his fingers. It clattered onto the concrete beside the grave, a small syringe filled with cloudy liquid. Gasps rippled again through the mourners. The guards pounced, pinning him to the ground as he kicked and screamed. "No!" Robert roared. She was supposed to be gone. She was supposed to be. His words were cut off as the guards twisted his arms behind him. Sweat drenched his face, and the mask of grief he had worn melted into naked rage. All eyes swung to Dr. Samuel. The doctor had stepped backward, his face drained of color. He tugged nervously at his collar, sweat sliding down his temple. I pronounced what I saw," he stammered. "I thought she was gone." Thomas's voice cut sharp through the air. "Liar! You helped him. You signed her death knowing she still lived." It was not a reach of ability to see her breath. Margaret coughed again, this time stronger. She struggled upright with the aunt's help, her hair tumbling loose, her skin damp with sweat. Her eyes red and fierce, locked on Robert. Tears spilled, but her voice shook with power. "What did I ever do to you?" she said, her words cracking the silence. "To deserve this?" Robert froze in the arms of the guards. Margaret's voice rose, trembling with anger and sorrow. "I gave you power. I trusted you with a branch of my empire. I loved you despite my wealth. And this is how you repay me." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some wept, others shook their heads in disbelief. Margaret's gaze shifted to Dr. Samuel, who stood rooted like a guilty tree. "And you," she spat, her voice trembling. "I built your hospital. I gave you a car. I lifted you when you had nothing. How could you betray me with him?" Dr. Samuel stammered, his lips fumbling for words. I. But the truth was already clear, written in his sweat, in his silence. Margaret's strength faltered, and she swayed. Thomas was at her side in an instant, steadying her with gentle, calloused hands. His voice was soft now, stripped of thunder. "Easy, madam, you are safe." She turned to him, her eyes meeting his. They were filled with tears, but beneath them was a glimmer of gratitude, fierce and raw. For the first time, she saw past a ragged beard and tattered coat. She saw the man who had saved her life. "Who are you?" she whispered, her breath shaky. "Why did you do this?" Thomas lowered his eyes, his voice rough like gravel. "Because I knew the truth," he said. "I heard him yesterday in his car. He spoke of quick burial, of silence, of how the empire would be his. I couldn't let it happen. Not again." The mourners drew closer, hanging on every word. Margaret clung to his arm, her body trembling, her breath shallow but steady. Her voice cracked as she spoke. You saved me. You gave me back my life." Robert screamed again, thrashing against the guards. She should be mine. Everything should be mine. But his cries fell flat, drowned out by the prayers rising from the crowd, by the sobs of those who had loved Margaret, by the furious glares turned his way. Sirens wailed in the distance. The police were coming. Thomas, still kneeling at Margaret's side, lifted his head toward the approaching sound. His eyes burned, not with pride, but with something deeper. Sorrow, the memory of his own broken life, weighed on him like chains. Margaret noticed. She touched his hand weakly. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Don't leave my side." And as the police vehicles rolled into the cemetery gates, their red lights flashing against the marble tombstones, everyone turned to watch the end of one chapter and the trembling beginning of another, because Margaret Thompson, thought dead, now breathed again, and the man who had dragged her back from the grave, the poor stranger they had all ignored, was about to change everything. The officers stepped forward. The guards shoved Robert into their arms. Dr. Samuel's knees buckled, and he fell to the ground sobbing. The police read the charges aloud. Attempted murder, conspiracy, betrayal. But Thomas said nothing. He only held Margaret steady as she sat upon her own casket, the woman who refused to die. And in that moment, with flashing lights bouncing across his weathered face, the world saw Thomas not as a beggar, not as a madman, but as a voice that had stopped death itself. Margaret whispered again, this time louder, tears streaming down her cheeks, "Thank you for saving me." And the crowd, still in shock, leaned forward, wondering what would happen next. The court was overflowing. Every seat was taken. Every corner crammed with people pressing forward to witness the case that had gripped the nation. Outside, television vans lined the street, cameras flashing as anchors whispered into microphones. The news was everywhere. Billionaire Margaret Thompson rose from the dead. Husband and family doctor arrested in shocking conspiracy. Margaret herself entered slowly, supported by Thomas on one side and her aunt on the other. Her steps were unsteady, but her head was lifted high. She wore a plain black gown, nothing of her usual glittering elegance, but her presence filled the room. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she sat down at the front, her eyes fixed on the accused. Robert sat in the dock, his face pale, his eyes cold. Gone was the mask of grief he had worn at the funeral. Now his lips curled in disdain as he glanced at Margaret. Beside him sat Dr. Samuel, his head bowed, his hands trembling. Sweat darkened his shirt under the courtroom's bright lights. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp glasses, banged her gavel. This court is now in session. The case of the state versus Robert Thompson and Dr. Samuel Emery. Charges: attempted murder, conspiracy to murder, and medical malpractice. Let the woman speak. The prosecutor rose, his voice firm and cutting. My lord, what we have before us is not a simple matter of greed. It is the cold-blooded plot of a husband who sought to bury his wife alive, aided by a doctor who betrayed his oath. Their aim was to seize control of her empire, billions in assets, companies that feed families across this nation. But for the courage of one man, this wickedness would have been sealed under the soil. The crowd murmured. Many glanced at Thomas, who sat quietly at Margaret's side. His coat washed now, his beard combed, though his face still bore the scars of hardship. He looked down, uncomfortable under the sudden attention. The prosecutor turned toward Robert. Do you deny plotting to poison your wife with a slow-acting compound designed to mimic death? Do you deny instructing this doctor to pronounce her dead prematurely and rush her burial? Robert leaned forward, his voice cold. I deny everything. This is nothing but lies spun by a mad vagrant and a woman too weak to understand her own body's failure. My wife was dying already. I merely accepted it. Gasps filled the room. Margaret's jaw clenched. She rose suddenly, her voice shaking with rage. You liar, she cried. Look at me, Robert. You put poison in my food. You forced my doctor, my friend, to swear I was gone. You tried to bury me alive like trash. The judge banged the gavel sharply. Order in the court, but the electricity in the air was uncontainable. The prosecutor lifted a small vial sealed in evidence bagging. My lord, this was retrieved from the syringe found beside the grave. Analysis proves it is a paralytic toxin capable of slowing the heartbeat, making the victim appear dead. Only a trained doctor could confirm life. And yet this doctor signed a death certificate. All eyes turned to Dr. Samuel. His face collapsed. He sobbed openly, his words tumbling. I was forced. He threatened me. Robert said if I didn't help, he would ruin me. He said I would lose my hospital, my family. I swear I only signed because I was afraid. Margaret's face darkened. Afraid. You let him put me in a coffin. You let them lower me into the earth. You betrayed your oath in me. Dr. Samuel buried his face in his hands. Forgive me, Margaret. Forgive me. The prosecutor turned to the judge. My lord, we have the poison. We have the syringe. We have the testimony of the victim herself. And we have the witness, the man who risked his life to speak the truth. Thomas froze as the prosecutor's hand gestured toward him. The entire court turned to face him. Whispers rose. That's the poor man, the beggar who stopped the funeral. The judge nodded. Mr. Thomas Parker, please step forward. Thomas rose slowly, each step echoing in the silent hall. He stopped at the witness stand, his rough hands gripping the wooden rail. The oath was read. He swore, his voice low but steady. The prosecutor leaned close. Mr. Parker, tell this court what you witnessed. Thomas lifted his head, his eyes scanning the hall. He swallowed hard. Then his voice rang out, calm but heavy with truth. The day before the burial, I was under the bridge where I sleep. I heard a car parked nearby. 2 men were inside, Robert and Dr. Samuel. They were arguing. I heard Robert say, the poison worked. She is cold already. Tomorrow we bury her before anyone suspects." The doctor said he was scared, but Robert told him, "Do as I say, or you'll lose everything." The crowd erupted again. The judge shouted for silence. Thomas's voice grew stronger. I knew then that if I didn't speak, they would bury her alive. I waited at the cemetery. When they brought her coffin, I begged them to stop. They called me mad, but I saw her fingers twitch. I could not let them lower her in. He paused, his eyes moist. I lost my wife and daughter years ago. I was powerless then, but not this time. Not again. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the quiet sobbing of a few women in the gallery. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "God bless you, Thomas." The defense attorney rose, his tone mocking. "So we are to believe the word of a beggar, a man who sleeps under bridges. How do we know he did not imagine these words? How do we know he wasn't paid by my client's enemies to cause chaos?" Thomas's jaw tightened. He stood taller. "I may be poor. I may sleep on the streets. But I do not lie. I have nothing to gain, only the truth to tell." The judge leaned forward, her face stern. "The witness has spoken with courage. Let the court weigh his words alongside the evidence." Robert slammed his fists on the table. "His lying. They are all lying." But his voice cracked, desperate, hollow. The gavel struck again. Order. As the trial moved on, one truth was clear. The mask of Robert had fallen. The empire he dreamed of was slipping from his grasp, and Thomas, the man he would never have noticed in his richest days, now stood as a key to his downfall. And as Margaret sat, her hand clutching Thomas's, a new thought sparked in the hearts of all watching. Perhaps this was not just a resurrection, but his, too. The trial of truth had begun, and nothing would remain the same. The trial stretched into days. Each morning, the courtroom overflowed with reporters, business magnates, and ordinary people who had come just to see Margaret Thompson alive and speaking. Every evening, the headlines blazed across America. From grave to courtroom, Margaret's shocking return. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Robert sat stiff, his once perfect suits wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Gone was the smooth-talking businessman the public once admired. He looked like a caged animal, pacing, snarling whenever a witness spoke against him. Dr. Samuel, in contrast, grew weaker with every session. He avoided Margaret's eyes, his shoulders bent as though carrying the weight of his betrayal. Sometimes he muttered prayers under his breath, his fingers trembling whenever evidence was shown. On the fourth day, the prosecutor called forward a new witness, Margaret's personal driver, Marcus, a large man with honest eyes. He stepped to the stand, his voice steady. "My lord," he began, "on the night Madam collapsed, I drove her to the hospital. She was struggling to breathe. But when we reached the gate, Dr. Samuel told me to leave, that he would handle it privately. I begged to stay. He refused. 2 hours later, he told us she was dead. The court gasped. Margaret covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Marcus bowed his head. I knew something was wrong. Madam was weak but not gone. I should have fought harder. The prosecutor nodded. So you confirm, Mr. Marcus, that Dr. Samuel insisted on isolation and gave no room for second opinion? Yes, sir. The defense squirmed. Their case was collapsing like a wall of sand under rain. Next came the toxicologist presenting charts and slides. The substance found in the syringe is called tetrodotoxin. In low doses, it mimics death, slows heartbeat, freezes muscles, masks breath. Without advanced equipment, one could easily mistake the victim for a corpse. It was intentional. This was no accident. The room fell silent. The weight of the evidence pressed on everyone. Finally, the judge turned to Robert. Mr. Thompson, you have heard the charges, the testimony, the scientific proof. Do you have anything to say before this court passes judgment? Robert rose slowly, his face twisted, half fury, half despair. His voice cracked as he spoke. Yes, I have something to say. I loved Margaret once, but she loved her companies more than me. Everything was always about her empire, her billions, her power. What was I? A shadow in her house, a husband in name only. I was supposed to share in her glory, yet she treated me like a servant. Margaret flinched as though struck. The audience murmured, stunned. Robert's voice grew louder, his fists shaking. So yes, I wanted it all. I wanted what was mine. If she had to die for me to live as a man, so be it. Chaos erupted. Shouts, gasps, cries of outrage filled the court. The judge banged her gavel furiously. Order! Order! Margaret's tears spilled freely now. She stood, trembling, but strong, her voice rising above the noise. You fool! Love is not stolen. Respect is not forced. You had everything, my trust, my home, my life. But your greed drowned you. You tried to kill me, and now you have killed yourself. Robert's eyes burned with madness. I regret nothing, he roared, his voice echoing. Guards surged forward as he tried to leap across the dock. They held him down, shackles clinking as he screamed curses. Dr. Samuel broke into sobs, collapsing onto the floor of the dock. Forgive me, my lord. Forgive me, Margaret. I betrayed everything I swore to be. I deserve death. The judge's gavel thundered once more. The whole fell into tense silence. Her voice was firm, unshaken. This court has heard enough. Robert Thompson, you are guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy to murder, and greed of the highest order. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor. May your chains remind you of the life you tried to bury. Robert screamed as the guards dragged him away, his voice echoing. It should have been mine, all mine. The judge turned to Dr. Samuel. And you, Dr. Samuel Emery, trusted with life, but dealing in death. Your betrayal of your oath is unforgivable. This court sentences you to life imprisonment as well. You will never again hold the life of another in your hands. Dr. Samuel collapsed into his chair, too broken to resist as police carried him out. The gavel struck a final time. Court dismissed. The whole erupted, some clapping, others weeping, all buzzing with the weight of history. Reporters rushed out to spread the verdict. Margaret, exhausted, sank into her seat. Her body trembled with relief and pain. She whispered, "It's over." But beside her, Thomas shook his head gently. "No, madam, it is only the beginning. You have your life again now. What will you do with it?" She turned to him, her eyes soft, her lips trembling with gratitude. "I wouldn't be here without you. You have no home, no rest, yet you gave me both. Thomas, you saved me." Thomas looked away, his voice quiet. "I only did what I could not do before. My wife, my daughter, I failed them. But this time, I could not fail." Margaret touched his hand firm and warm. "You did not fail. You were my miracle." Around them, people gathered, trying to shake Thomas's hand, clapping him on the back, praising him. He had been invisible for years, a shadow on the streets. Now he stood in the light. The man who stopped a burial, the man who saved a billionaire. Margaret rose, still holding his hand. "You will not return to the bridge tonight," she said firmly. "From this day you walk with me. If I lived again, then so will you." Thomas's throat tightened. Tears welled in his eyes, but he nodded silent. For the first time in years, he felt seen. And as they left the courtroom together, Margaret, her aunt, and Thomas at her side, the crowd outside roared like a storm. Cameras flashing, voices chanting his name. Thomas, Thomas, the man who stopped death. And though the chains had closed on Robert and Samuel, new doors were opening, doors that neither Margaret nor Thomas had ever imagined before. The battle for justice was won, but the journey of redemption had only just begun. The heavy doors of Margaret Thompson's mansion opened to a new season of life. The house that once smelled of morning now breathed fresh air, its corridors filled with sunlight and hope. But behind the glow, the scars of betrayal lingered. After the trial ended, and Robert and Dr. Samuel were sentenced, Margaret invited Thomas to stay at her estate. One evening after dinner, she led him into her private study. The room was lined with mahogany shelves, books stacked in neat rows, and a single lamp casting a warm glow. Margaret poured 2 glasses of water and gestured for Thomas to sit. His hand shook slightly as he held the cup. For a long time, he stared into it as though searching for courage. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and raw. "Madam Margaret, there's something I've carried alone for years. Tonight, I must say it." Margaret leaned forward, her eyes soft with concern. He swallowed hard. I wasn't always like this. I was once a man with dignity, a software engineer, a husband, and a father. But one day, everything collapsed. I lost my job. My wife packed her things, and she vanished with my daughter. She left only a note. His voice broke. A note telling me the child I raised. The girl I called mine wasn't my blood. Margaret's eyes widened, tears springing to them. Thomas pressed his palms together tightly. The betrayal destroyed me. I wandered the streets, unable to breathe, unable to live. I slept under bridges because hope abandoned me. His shoulders trembled. But yesterday, under that bridge, I overheard Robert. He was making phone calls from his car, planning to take over your companies after you were buried. His words froze my blood. That's why I ran to the cemetery. That's why I stopped them. For a long moment, silence filled the study. Only the faint ticking of the clock could be heard. Margaret's hands shook as she reached across the table and clasped his. "Thomas," she whispered, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You carried all that pain and still you risked your life for me. Do you know what that means?" Thomas's voice cracked. "It means maybe I still have a reason to exist." In the days following his confession, Margaret refused to let Thomas slip back into the shadows of a mansion. She saw something in him, not just a man who had saved her life, but a mind sharpened by hardship and loss. At first, Thomas resisted. "Madam, I am no longer the man I used to be. Let me serve you quietly in the background," he said one morning as he helped carry files from her study. But Margaret shook her head. "You will not hide anymore. You have given me back my life. Let me give you back yours." So Thomas began helping with small duties in Thompson Holdings, carrying files, checking schedules, organizing reports. He moved with humility, keeping his head down. Yet little by little, his hidden brilliance surfaced. One afternoon, during a tense board meeting, the company's directors struggled with a corrupted presentation file. Panic spread across the room as investors waited impatiently. While others fumbled, Thomas quietly stepped forward. In minutes, he reprogrammed the system and restored the slides. Gasps filled the room. "Where did you learn that?" a director asked in disbelief. Thomas hesitated. "I was once a software engineer before everything fell apart." Margaret's eyes softened with pride. She rose and announced firmly, "From today, Thomas is no longer a helper in the background. He is my special advisor, and his counsel will guide this company." The board members exchanged looks, some skeptical, others intrigued. But no one could deny the calm authority in Margaret's voice. For the first time in years, Thomas stood tall. No longer a nameless wanderer, he was a man reborn, and with his input, Thompson Holdings was never the same again. Margaret and Thomas grew closer. They spent evenings in the study talking about life, faith, and second chances. She admired his honesty, his unpolished wisdom, his sincerity that cut deeper than diamonds. For the first time since a betrayal, she found her heart stirring. Quietly, Margaret wished he might love her, not as the billionaire the world saw, but as a woman whose soul had been bruised. Yet Thomas never seemed to notice the silent longing in her eyes. One afternoon, as they strolled in the garden, Thomas spoke with unusual excitement. "Margaret, I want you to meet someone. Her name is Rebecca. She is kind, gentle. She makes me smile again." Margaret's heart clenched. She forced a smile even as her chest ached. She had hoped foolishly that Thomas might see her as more than a friend, but reality stood firm. He loved another. That night, Margaret cried alone in her room. Yet by dawn, she resolved her pain into strength. "If he cannot be mine, then I will support his happiness." When Thomas proposed to Rebecca months later, Margaret insisted on sponsoring the wedding. "It is my honor," she told him, her smile hiding the bittersweet truth in her heart. The wedding day was beautiful. The garden was decorated with white roses and golden drapes. Thomas stood tall in a navy blue suit, his eyes glowing as Rebecca, dressed in an elegant white gown, walked toward him. Margaret watched from the front row, her eyes glistening. Though her heart once longed for him, she felt peace seeing him happy. When they exchanged vows, she clapped with genuine joy, whispering to herself, "This is what he deserves. Love, laughter, a new beginning." Months after Thomas's marriage, fate surprised Margaret, too. At a charity gala, she met Daniel, a businessman known not for wealth alone, but for his humility and compassion. He admired Margaret not as a billionaire, but as a survivor. Their friendship grew into something deeper. Daniel brought back laughter into Margaret's life, and for the first time since her near death, she felt whole. When Daniel proposed months later, Margaret said yes. At her wedding, Thomas and Rebecca sat proudly in the front row, clapping as she walked down the aisle. This time, there were no tears of regret, only gratitude. 1 year later, life blossomed again. Thomas and Rebecca welcomed a baby boy whom they named Joshua. Around the same time, Margaret and Daniel celebrated the birth of their baby girl, Sophia. One golden evening, they gathered in the mansion's garden, the babies cradled in their arms. Thomas rocked Joshua gently while Margaret held Sophia close to her chest. Tears filled their eyes as they looked at each other. They remembered how close death had come, how betrayal nearly buried them both. Yet here they were alive, surrounded by laughter, holding the promise of a future in tiny innocent hands. Thomas raised his glass. "From ashes to dawn," he said softly. Margaret smiled, whispering back, "Yes, from ashes to dawn." But one name was never forgotten. Robert. In prison, Robert was a broken man. The arrogance that once fueled him had crumbled under the weight of iron bars. Life behind walls gnawed at him, and every night he replayed the moment he watched Margaret rise from the coffin. He began writing letters from prison, begging for forgiveness. At first, Margaret ignored them, but the letters never stopped. They grew humbler, soaked with regret. "Margaret, I was blind. Greed consumed me. If I could turn back time, I would kneel at your feet and beg 1,000 times. Please forgive me. Let my story be a warning to others." 10 years later, on the 10th anniversary of Margaret's survival, she shocked the nation. At a grand event where her family, Thomas, Rebecca, and their children stood beside her, she announced, "10 years ago, I nearly went to the grave because of betrayal. But today, I choose not to let hatred bury me again. I forgive Robert Thompson." The whole gasped. Some clapped. Others murmured in disbelief. But Margaret's eyes were firm. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is freedom. If my survival is to mean anything, it must teach us that love, not vengeance, writes the final chapter. And weeks later, Robert was released after 10 long years. He walked out of prison, a frail man, his once proud face lined with regret. He had nothing left. No wealth, no family, no power. In a tiny rented room on the outskirts of town, he lived quietly. Whenever Margaret appeared on television, smiling with Daniel, laughing with Sophia, he would sit alone, tears running down his face. He whispered to the empty walls, "Greed destroyed me. Let my mistake teach others what I failed to see." Back at the mansion, Margaret and Thomas often sat in the garden together with their spouses, watching their children play. They spoke not of betrayal anymore, but of hope. Margaret would smile at Thomas and say, "We lived through death, and now we live for life." And as the sun set behind them, painting the sky with golden fire, their story stood as a testimony that even from the grave hope can rise, that from betrayal love can bloom, that from ashes dawn will always come. What is your view about this story? If you were in Margaret's shoes, would you have forgiven Robert? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.